Welcome, everyone, and I'm just thrilled that so many I know of you that are here, and thank you for coming out this morning. We've prepared, I think, hopefully a presentation that will hopefully stretch your thought process. I've been immersed in building AI models and designing things for about 15 years. And we've learned a great deal in that journey. And I have a lot of concerns in some of the executive decision-making practices around the world. So I want to kind of how like stretch us, not just in terms of our roles within our companies, but the roles we have within our families, but also the roles and commitment we have in society. Because this is a time where we all need to have a stronger voice. And if we don't, we will inherit a world that we hadn't planned for. So my comments, I think, are hopefully stretching. I was going, one of our dear organizers, Harry's not in the room right now. There he is, he's over there. He keeps moving chairs. He was there and he was there. And I think you're my favorite because you're like a frog. You just kind of move around. I say that generously because when I was a little kid, I used to like to collect them. I was kind of curious about little green frogs. So to begin today, just going to press along here. We're going to introduce the theme, the AI good, and the AI bad, and the AI ugly. Some of you, no doubt, have seen this movie and the spaghetti western, but we thought we would just play a little snippet to set the stage, and then I'm going to integrate the theme throughout the presentation. So the back, all I know is I just need to press a button, and you guys hit it, and you nod, right? So it works? And loud, please. Thanks. Like really loud. Okay, quiet then. So we have a sound problem. Isn't that always the way Murphy is? You do the test in the morning, it works, and then, okay, thank you. Missed that little moment. Okay. Okay. Clint Eastwood's playing the character Blondie. He's a good guy. That's Tukon. He's the bad guy. Part of my dream was to have an audience start to go echo, 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 but I'll keep you. I know we're not quite as adventurous as that. Maybe one day. Okay. Okay, I think with the sound we'll just do a cut because I think it was just to do a little intro there, but you can cut the sound. I'm kind of worried about the reverberation there, and there's a lot of content to go through. So as I said, the reason I picked this particular theme is that I think when I step back and look around the world, I can see tremendous good, I can see tremendous challenges, but I also see some real ugliness, and I really want us to think harder about the implications on some of the ugliness side. So first of all, because you're here, and hopefully we have a few more stragglers coming in, I want to get a quick show of hands, I think, in terms of who's here. So I'm going to ask you, when I ask this question, to stand up, stay standing, move your arms around a little bit if you need a little bit of energy. So how many of you here in this room think you're in the emergent stage, in other words, the infancy, just kind of getting going with AI? And the bankers can't stand up, okay? You're not in the emergent stage. There's no way. Okay, so we got, okay, Van City thinks you're in the emergent stage. The York University, I think, thinks you're, because if I know you, I'll kind of just say, okay, you can both sit down, so that's two. You're not in the emergent stage. No way. No way. I've seen the RBC AI index report, and I know some of the great work you guys, no way. Sorry, that doesn't. Assurance, okay. Yeah, okay, but on the next one is the toddler stage. Maybe the insurance can stand up in the toddler stage. And those are the ones that are taking aim in the right direction, but you're still learning and you're a little bit unbalanced. So how many of you think you're in the toddler stage? That you're a little bit past emergence, okay. And you've got Scott, you're from a financial service organization, and I, Phil, you're Retail, okay, and that's where you think you guys are, so we got 2 out of 2. All right, so next one is, how many of you think you're in the teenager stage where you've got some great things happening, but there's still many bumps in the road? So, all right, so, all right, TDs, teenager stage, where are you? Interact.
Hang on, I've only been there a week and a half.
Oh, I know, you're the new OD person.
That's right.
Okay, they
My
need you.
observation in a week and a half.
Okay, that's cool, cool. And we've got cooperators, and you're also the teen, and I, oh, sorry? Oh, intact, great. Insurance as well, right? And cooperators, okay, all right. So, okay, all right, great. Well, great. Well, thanks for sharing. How many of you think you're in the harmonization stage where you're far more mature, robust operating practices, demonstratable AI value realization are being picked up as a best practice? Okay, Jean. MasterCard, okay, all right, awesome. And then how many of you didn't stand up?
We're not sure where we sit. Probably the teenager that acts like a toddler.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in context some big macro themes because I think this is kind of the stretch thinking that I want to ensure that you have riveted in your minds, and then we'll go into specific examples of good, bad, and ugly. So everybody here understands on the economic landscape what's going on in terms of the incredible technology titans and the fact that we have more wealth in those technology titans than we do in many countries around the world. It's important you understand that. The lobbying, the policy, the pressure points, the decision making, not being taken to be held accountable for actions that are absolutely egregious, unprofessional, and don't represent the values we want for humanity. And you need to really internalize that because it makes an impact on the decisions you make to invest in the companies that you work with and what they stand for. NVIDIA, incredible growth, wonderful growth, worth more than Canada at this point in time. Just most people don't know that little factoid. Valuations around $5 trillion. In terms of other developments, if you're following the concerns of about in the market, Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal, etc., and other ones took $100 million off the table just about a month ago in terms of investment in NVIDIA. So we're starting to see some behaviors around the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, that I think you need to be aware of. And if there are economists in the room, they're probably advising you to do the same. On the broader front, in terms of AGI, general intelligence, superintelligence, and where are we at, I follow very closely a lot of research sources, and I follow particularly the Stanford Research Index report. There are only 2 areas left where AI hasn't exceeded human potential. Those 2 areas are advanced mathematics and basic reading comprehension. We used to have a position that AGI, general intelligence, would happen in about 4 years or 5 years, it was about 30 to 50 years was kind of the span. We now have people, the brightest scientists in the world, going on record, this is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So there will be nothing, you have to internalize this, that AI can't do better than a human, right? Now, what does that mean when we've got that kind of a dynamic? Well, first, it's already starting to show up in the global internet in terms of the amount of content that's in the web. We have over 50% of the content now that's generated by AI. That trajectory is going through the roof. So what that means is that people strategically have to look back and say, where is the best content that's verified? And if a lot of the large language models are scraping the global web, and over 50% of that is generated by AI that has no auditable controls, no human in the loop, how do we know what's real? So those of you who are in cybersecurity, please stand up because these are our best next friends. I think there's a gentleman over there that's in cybersecurity from BlackBerry. Stand up. It's great to see BlackBerry generating a healthy return. I just want you to know that. Just was really pleased to see some of the turnaround there with leadership. Who else is cybersecurity here? Anybody else has got that kind of? Okay, also offset Van City. And I say that very sincerely, you can sit down, because I really do think that your best friends are the cybersecurity people. It's also a great career to be in right now. The other macro trend This one's hard for me because when we all went through COVID, Cindy started to read all kinds of different things, which I'm dangerous at. So I read a wonderful book called Permission to Feel. And if you don't remember anything that I've said today, please buy that book and read it for your children. It's written by Dr. Mark Brackett. He's the head of the Emotional Intelligence Institute at Yale. And in that particular book, and by the way, a lot of the OD friends I have are reading, so if you're nodding and you know that work, really talks about the gap we have on employee happiness on an international level, but also how humans, our little ones, aren't learning to communicate how they feel. We've got some really systemic, deep issues here. So they follow very, very closely. He follows those patterns. This particular research, if you just type into Mr. Google and it's real, the Happiness Research Index, you can see on a global basis where all the different countries are internationally. But this is a disturbing point because if you look at Canada, and I did some further research, we've got 500,000 Canadians that miss work every week due to mental illness with an estimated economic impact of $51 billion annually. We now have 50% of our youth, 50% of our youth have one or two mental health issues right now. 50%. These are huge issues. These to me are board level discussions of what we're doing to ensure that our leaders, and I want to make one point very clear. The research shows, and we know, and you know as humans, when things go awry, it's not necessarily the entire company. It's the leader that you are working with and how you're feeling heard, respected. You know that in your guts. We need to make sure we've got the right leaders in management positions. If not, we have to move them out pretty quickly because the implications there are very, very harmful. So those are some of the big themes. Now we're going to get really more concrete, more practical in the sense of the realities of where maybe some of the development aspects are. But when I stepped back and I said, okay, Cindy, if you have to draw a picture here, what would it be? And so somehow my slides went dead. Techies. There. Picture that I wanted to see, and it was actually of the boiling frog. And I know this isn't a metaphor. This is not a new metaphor, but I think it serves a purpose here in terms of system thinking, where we all know you can press on one side of an operating model and expect a result, but it doesn't happen because you've forgotten about some other dynamics. Where we live in a very integrated systems structure, and those dynamics have a role to play, and there's also physics involved. I don't want to wake up and feel that we've become boiling frogs as we look at some of those macro trends and inheriting a world that we could have actually designed differently. But it's going to take each individual here, each individual in companies to have these deeper conversations. It's very, very easy to be a herd and possibly fall off a cliff. We did that with climate change. This world we're in right now is even more complicated. And I really, really, not trying to be negative, it's just, these are real things. In terms of the varying global AI approaches, I also teach AI ethics and law, so I was reading this morning, much to my chagrin, at 5 o'clock in the morning, the new announcement on, but this one's concerning. If you know on the international landscape, you would already know that the European Union has been very, very focused on putting in legislation that actually protects humans. Deeper constructs on risk management, high-risk applications such as utilities or infrastructure should have a kill switch. Kind of a no-brainer, right? If you were familiar with the policies that were set forth in France in the Paris Accord, even China signed off. Canada signed off, states didn't. And you step back and you say, why? Well, the argument there is we don't want to slow down innovation. But there are risks, always. I don't know about you, but I want to know that there's a kill switch if something goes wrong and something's been hacked. I want to know that that is a legal requirement. So I don't have all the time. Obviously, I spend a lot of time, and I could do a day on this topic. China continues to do what China always does, right? Very centralized, very focused on surveillance, continues in ways that, we now, well, I'll talk about some of the other things. Canada, we're terribly lagging behind. I know we've got a new minister. I actually contributed some of the inputs of some of the policy perspectives that I think are needed. But we had a chance to be out front, and we still don't have legislation. Right, this is 5 years ago. Like, let's get on with it. All you have to do is lock. Peter Aceto's also a lawyer, CEO, guru. Lock some good minds and just get the paperwork done. I've already talked about the bubble burst. I won't say too much there. It's pretty well all over the news. Actually, when I was preparing a little bit more last night, I sent my husband, true story, Perry, did we diversify our portfolio? Because I know we've got a lot of tech stock. I said, I hope we've taken some off the table because I do think something's going to happen next year. I was a former VC, and he sent me a note back this morning. He said, yep, I already took half off. I said, great. I said, then hold and reinvest when because you do need to be alert right now in terms of some of those dynamics. So in case you haven't, I really think you should take a close look at your technology portfolio. In terms of 3 points of view, and I've got a number of points of view here that I want to make, I want to talk a little bit about the good, because there's so much good, on specific use cases, right? And you know that, and I know that. Want to talk about one of the concerns, and also I think a future hope for CTOs, CIOs, organizations to bulk up skills in context engineering, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then also some of the recent research on the impacts on human decision making, just to throw another perspective out there. I have been following cobots and robotics for 15 years. I think we're so occupied in AI, we have to, in Canada, start really thinking about cobots. They're not going away. All you have to do is look at the growth curve, follow the money in robotics, and it is absolutely an interesting area. Here, for example, many of you may or may not know that we have 300 to 500 amputations per day, 185,000 each year worldwide. We have in Canada about 40 daily, due either to diabetes or accidents, things of that nature. But when you think about fusing AI intelligence with robotics, and I've lost an arm or a leg, the opportunity to play again the piano, to play the drums, to be able to walk, all these things are happening, and those to me are really, really positive because you're extending life, you're extending joy. Those are all positive. Another aspect here, if you're following this particular sector, is the aging population. Well, as they say, 65 is the new 30. The highest growth segment that we have actually in forming business is 65 right now, or 63, just so you know. The fastest growth segment of starting up companies. The baby boomers do not want to stop, right? It's a really interesting development. In terms of the market, we have right now about 20% of our population in Canada is 65 or older. It's 20% now. So the impact on the healthcare systems is huge. We're already seeing, what Asia's doing in Japan. 50% of their population is older than ours. They're having to introduce cobots and robots, but this is going well beyond. They're complete hospitals that are dealing with complete test cases of everything AI and robotics driven, right? So a lot of innovations going on. If you go and visit Constellate, our largest retirement homes, not Constellations, I always get the C mixed up. Jennifer, not Constellation, but Chartwell, thank you, Chartwell Residence, right? And you go into their, 400 homes, you're not going to find little cobots there. Why? This is a chance for us to innovate. I was last week in New York, and I met this incredible female MIT graduate. She's got a company called Spirituality, or Spiritual, something like Spiritual AI. And I thought, okay, what's this about? How wacky was this idea? But I sat down with her, and I looked at her business model, because we have, you kind of dig pretty deep. They've invented this wonderful little robot that can sit there, and you can have, so it's like Hanson Robotics with Sophia, but a little cute little one that you can sit, in the kitchen. You can ask it for a recipe, you can ask it to solve a problem, but it's very soft and cuddly, so people have a friend. Because one of the other issues that's happening is loneliness is on the rise, right? So AI can be, I think, very, very good in terms of this particular sector. We see an explosion on the retail sector with toys, and they're good, and I'll talk about some of the bad in a moment. in the sense for STEM, stands for education. There's all that extra stimulation. However, and by the way, Botley, if you don't know about Botley, it's about $100. It's a really cool little robot that you can teach kids 5 or up on about 150 different programming aspects. So if you're looking for innovative ideas, I would recommend little Botley. But on the negative side, there's a lot of research coming out on, and you know this, that children shouldn't be exposed to more than 10 or 15 minutes a day to digital. It impacts their cognitive development. And you see families, if you haven't recently, they're all out for dinner and their cell phones are out and they're not talking to one another. There's a whole body of research going on at MIT as humans losing the ability to communicate. Same thing with permission to feel. Being able to articulate spectrums. How happy are you? Moderate or joyous? Big difference, right? And why? And feeling comfortable to say, I'm here. This is an example here of a $500 million fine by a company in China. There's many other companies that have been fined because the issue there is with the purchase, the geolocation information of the children were exposed. That data was being kept, not being kept private. But more importantly, there wasn't parental consent. We don't have legislation to monitor these toys, so it's upon us as consumers to really understand what's going into our children's well-being. I'm going to start shifting to more businessy things, but I really think we need to be aware of the world around us, right? Because the decisions that we make, it's like a ripple effect. I studied complexity science and physics theory when I was a lot younger. And what's interesting in physics, and how many of people have physics background, out of curiosity? Okay, how many people want to have a physics background? Anyways, it's the amplification and the attractor theory, right? How we can swarm together, but there are ripples. And those ripples, you have to watch with the ripples that are on the edge, because those are the outliers. And the outliers are the ones that creep in without us consciously being aware. On the AI bad, how many of you seen Dr. Joy Buolamwini's research? There's got to be somebody here. Oh, wow. I followed her research for 10 years too. Thank you. Joy is one of the brightest Black MIT graduates on this planet. She was very courageous in her late 20s. She said, I'm going to test these image-based systems that are training AI to ensure that there's integrity in the data set. She found very quickly her Black face wasn't recognized. So she lobbied, she sent letters to the CEOs of Meta, the CEOs of Microsoft, Amazon, etc., IBM too. Pretty well all the big players. Her research at MIT was showing that 1 out of 10 times a Black face would be recognized. Actually, it was 1 out of 100 when I think about back the earlier research. So she said and she proved it by, if I put a white face on, you know me. I'm invisible. So what that meant is that all of the companies had to retrain their image classification systems. They had to increase their inventory. They had to increase the technology to actually recognize the recognition systems. But then you have to step back and you have to look at all the other image-based systems who don't have the resources that the bigger players do. What are we getting? Procurement has to get into the game. Validate, inspect, have integrity controls to know that those data sets, in fact, are representing the values of the organization. Because if you don't get deeply involved, you don't know. And I can tell you one thing, huge issues in HR, for who are the things in HR here, because the whole resume environment for surfacing, the right candidate is incredibly skewed. The data bias is just over the top. So if you want to pick up her book, highly recommend it. It's a great read, and she's a beautiful person. On AI bias, because I know many of you are in financial services, I know others are from other industry, but we tried to just pick examples in FSI. It's not a new point in terms of AI issues, in terms of loans and underwriting in the sense of skewing things, but there's also issues in wealth management as well in terms of the data sets and how we are actually saying that these individuals are going to be the highest net worth, and hence we should get more of our time and more of our focus. So again, there's always anomalies, but if we always try to drive to the central point, remember, outliers, if you think about the Hispanic population, for example, huge consumer purchasing power. And yet, when you go into an LLM and or a Sora and you want to generate a picture, and you say, I'd like to create a picture of a Hispanic individual, you're going to get a picture more often than not of a man wearing a Mexican hat with a cigar in their mouth. Okay? JP Morgan did a research report, Wells Fargo did a research report on the incredible bias. So we have to be very alert to who we're working with, the kinds of technology constructs, and the verifications that are there. I've already mentioned a point earlier on the cognitive thinking decline, but I have a few more comments that I think are important. There's lots of research here that's been going over 25 years. Probably the most significant piece that just came out was out of MIT just a few months ago. Some of you may be aware of this research. It's now being called cognitive debt. And this is around where ChatGPT overusage, and I stress overusage, in fact, slows down the intellectual capacities of humans. So pause. Are we being dumbed down? Some researchers believe the only way humans can survive and evolve as a species is to integrate chips, neural links. That's the only way, because we're atrophying as a species. So these are kind of deep conversations, right? I'm not sure how many of the boardrooms have these conversations. We're so caught up in the 30, 60, 90. I mean, I've been there, right? The quarterly earnings, etc. But these are real. In terms of, I want to talk a bit more on AI, on application examples, mainly in Gen AI, and just give you a snapshot of where some of the good things are actually showing a positive return. Then I want to talk a little bit about the carbon footprint impact, and then talk a little bit about some of the dynamics on job security, especially for our youth right now. So next, and you're going to get a copy of these things, so you don't, just to try and listen, and you can kind of reflect a little bit. Here it just highlights some of the generative AI within financial services, and it's important to note that the return on these use cases, the more narrowly defined they are, the more precise, because you would have already learned about AI if you've been in the field, is that it's highly routine, highly repetitive tasks that have a synchronization that's highly predictable, right? Narrow, narrow, narrow. Code too wide, sometimes too deep, you're not going to get the same kind of performance and sustainability. Within the financial services, 60% of the banks that are using Gen AI, they're mainly tied to internal use cases, and I've been following pretty well all the banks really, really closely. So, applications a lot with Copilot is a good example, right? Marketing, front-end demand gen is another area which can have some really good returns. We know, even though we're a relatively small company, we use different agentic AI tools. And just the other day, because I'm flying off to Asia on a trip coming up, visiting Manila in the Philippines, and I said to our chief operating officer, I said, okay, I know we're going over, however, who should we be seeing? How fast can you find out? Because I want to send different CEOs letters. So we typed it into our software, came up with the right targets, their emails, their phone numbers, the LinkedIn, and a technographic profile. Well, happened in a nanosecond. Well, to me, from a marketing and sales coverage point of view, wow, how fast was that? That happened in 30 minutes. Then we shipped that information over to the Asia Pacific Foundation that's helping to organize these. But so we used to spend hours. You can just type in your prompt. And so anyways, I'm finding, so the return on investment in marketing is very high. And if you look at the research and looking at where banks are finding returns in ROI, you're going to find it in marketing. But obviously, also, they're putting a ton of resources or financial resources into fraud and security, right? And Jean, you're an expert in the cybersecurity side at MasterCard, so you know how important it is in those areas. In terms of who's the top of the pack, there is a wonderful research report that hopefully some of you know about, the Banking Index report that follows the AI leaders. Who's following that research? Okay, all right, we've got RBC, good, and this gentleman over here. That's great. So JP Morgan is at number 1. RBC stand-up is number 3 in that report, which I thought was incredible. And I started to think, okay, they've got the Borealis Research Institute. One of the criteria, this is important, was number of patents filed. RBC is writing a lot of patents if you dig into the covers. If you also look at our innovation statistics in Canada, we're not writing enough patents. So for everybody here, how do you encourage your innovations ranking? Start, lawyers are your best friends. Let's get going. And start actually protecting some of the innovative ideas that we have. We're very good in R&D. We all know here that we're not very good in commercializing. But again, JP Morgan's top of the pack. I think it's important to note the kind of budget they have. They have a budget of $18 billion, $2 billion on AI projects. They identified that they had 450 AI initiatives. They're planning to have over 1,000 in the next 12 months. So Cofomo, I think you should be calling JP Morgan. And obviously RBC too, and the others. On AI for Good, I put in the Bank of America because I've been following Bank of America's strategy for about 7 years. And what I found interesting with what they've been doing, they've been consolidating the real estate assets, so smaller per foot, square footage in terms of, but also putting more digital stimulation right into the entire experience. Most of these organizations haven't tested robots physically in those, like some of the ones in China that have, like China Construction Bank has a vision where all the retail banks, the China Construction Bank, one of the largest banks in China, will be fueled by cobots. But here's a really interesting app called Erica, and it is a best in class because architecturally they thought through multiple dimensional thinking. And I think that's so important. So if you're building an AI model and a chat bot, why think about one use case? Build the architectural construct that you can spin it around from either customer servicing or employee serving. So this is a bot. It's got tremendous traction, tremendous return on investment. So if you're not familiar with Erica, highly recommend that you do, just to give you a sense of the adoption metrics, which I always look for facts. 2 million plus client interactions, over 42 million clients by August 2025, 3 billion interactions, and over 50 million users. But they also use it for internaling, chatting. I need this, go find it. Search is a very, very powerful AI application. Most of the banks have put in, I was just chatting with TD Wealth, they're who we spend a bit of time with, but they have really worked hard on search intelligence there, which I think is why. So is Bank of Nova Scotia. I won't go through the returns here on the banks, but just to say our top banks are putting a lot of investment capital. RBC, because we have some RBC, and we have a TD gentleman here as well. Going out on public record, going to have a return of over $1 billion by 2027 as a result of AI-driven initiatives. Now, you would know what portion you have out of the insurance sector, and obviously you're probably somehow in this envelope, but the point being is that there is definitely acute awareness of the importance to innovate in this area. Generative AI demand, this is just a big macro point of view here. Revenues, 1.3 trillion to the global economy as a result of Gen AI. This is what's driven the AI cluster boom, right? But to fuel that growth, let's not underestimate the demands on the power and the electricity grid. We are into a perfect storm right now. We're building up so much investment. We don't necessarily have all the infrastructure that's required to run all these AI models. And the thing that a lot of people don't understand is once you train an AI model, it's not over. They have to be retrained as you add a new data set. Now, obviously, you can partition things off in some creative ways, but the fact is it's an ongoing capacity planning requirement in financial planning. This market is expected to reach over $1 trillion by 2030. One of my good friends is a CEO of a large, got to keep him confidential though, of a data center, fairly large firm that supports the big tech titans. I was talking to him last week, and he says, "Oh, Sin, I don't have a lot of time, but I'd love to catch up." And I said, "Okay, that's okay." And he said, "I'm working on $1 billion contract." And I said, "Oh, only $1 billion, no problem." So these numbers that are going on, to fuel these infrastructures are tremendous. I started to step back and I said, it's good old Cindy researcher. And okay, all right. So I got to find some information that gives me context on the consumption comparison. How do I put in perspective, as a human, or air travel? So this slide shows you the impact on CO2 emission risk. Air travel from New York to San Francisco, how much the carbon footprint is. Human life carbon footprint, cars, and then AI models. So we have, I say, a perfect storm because we dig into this, you know that we're building out infrastructures like crazy, but we also are going into nuclear power consideration, right? Microsoft's announced that. That creates another risk factor, right? Where are we going to store all this nuclear waste? So lots of people that are in the data center business are really happy because the demand and capacity and da-da-da-da. But there's also implications. So again, thinking about the societal implications here, we do need to be aware of. I need a time check because you know me, I just need to know where I'm at. I don't have my phone. Okay, so I've got 4 minutes? Okay, good. I'll just speed it up. Okay, quick point here on Chat GPT. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the job situation. And I know that there are many different points of view on this topic. Some people say, no, we're creating lots of jobs, there's not an impact. However, I want to tell you there is a real impact, and it's very, very real. So I've been following very, very closely a number of sources, but the part that I worry about the most is that within the generative AI, 70% of the administrative jobs will disappear. Like that, these are serious stats. Over most of those jobs are women. So women are going to be heavily impacted in families and lower income families. Paralegals, 70% of their jobs definitely is going away. So we already see that already. Paralegals that are actually maybe doing the research of things because now we've got better analytical tools that we can do research, put a prospectus together, etc. So this research comes from Goldman Sachs, just kind of shows the progression. It's also mirrored by Oxford as well in the patterns. On the fraud front, for those of you in cybersecurity, wow. The stats here are over 3,000% growth in the last year. I mean, those are the stats I've seen. Is that kind of what you're seeing, like 3,000% growth? Okay, we're not talking 100%, we're talking 3,000%. What's it going to be like next year? Because AI agents, agentic AI agents, moving into swarms, they never go to sleep. So, we're faced with how do we build faster, more intelligent capabilities to protect our organizations, to protect our people. And obviously in Canada, with 98% of our population being in small business, how many of them have that infrastructure to protect their businesses? Not enough. PayPal spent over $100 million over the last 2 years building out an agentic AI software set of tools that would constantly monitor to protect the organization. I don't know if they're open to share that information, but boy, I'd really want to understand what they did, right? I think companies have to get more creative in saying, okay, now it's a shared services. We're going to, because of that IP, we're going to actually help others to move along here more strategically. Last 3 points I want to make on the productivity gains. When you get this, this might be helpful. It kind of just shows you the different jobs, the percentage of the population that have those jobs, and the speed of AI diffusion on automating those jobs. And I mentioned already a couple of the points there. Accountants, lawyers, higher ends, they anticipate maybe around 10 to 20% of that time. The issue is the impact on the younger people, right? They're coming in, like I mentioned, the paralegals. I've already mentioned the office administrators. We are seeing, and Harry, you and I had a good conversation this morning in terms of the implications on jobs. And obviously, if you're following the papers, you would see Amazon, Microsoft, Autodesk, thousands and thousands of jobs. Bloomberg finished writing a report for those of you in financial services saying that over 200,000 jobs will be lost over the next 3 to 5 years due to AI in the financial services industry. And these are going to go into, very highly routine jobs, right? But are we going to invest in other capacity, right? Not sure. And I know we're going to open it up to questions in a few minutes, but I think the other big point, and I spent a lot of my practical day-to-day time. I don't get to talk about all these other things very often, so I'm really, really grateful to share other perspectives here rather than, okay, what problem are we solving? What's the data source? How do we build out the project plan? How do we deal with the transformation agenda? But 80% of these projects are failing. There's lots of research to support that, but I think what's really, really important to understand is why. And I find this quite fascinating because I'm old enough to have gone through a lot of these cycles of innovation, right? And having been a leader in a lot of these innovations, moving organizations through digital transformation, bringing in new capabilities, et cetera. It used to be, we used to worry about the algorithmic methods. And should we have a boosting algorithm on top of the existing algorithm to increase the odds and prediction? Should we, how should we, have our metadata organized? How do we make sure the data is labeled, yada, yada. And then we get so excited that we built a model that was performing. But guess what? The whole user interface, the whole experience, the whole adoption, that change management, all the OD things, everything's pointing to below the surface. That if we don't start putting about 30% of our operating budgets into change management enablement. So I just challenge you, when you look at your AI use cases, what percentage is going in? If it's only 10%, probably aren't going to have a positive ROI. Worldwide ROI on AI initiatives is running at about 5% globally right now. We did quite a bit of research with Ernst & Young on some of those facts. Just to close out, because I know I'm out of time, how do you get AI right? Well, I think first of all, we all know you have to start. All of you are in the game. The structure of your governance committees is really critical. You need to ensure that your cybersecurity leader is there. You need to make sure your lawyer is there. You need to make sure HR is in the conversation. HR, who better to represent gender and inclusiveness bias than somebody who's responsible for caring about diversity? Indigenous people. Many of you may or may not know that when we scrape the World Wide Web, it's mainly from English-centric countries. US, UK. What about all the other languages and how that their contextual context is being personified in the world that's dominating how we inform ourselves, right? So the governance piece is key. I've already mentioned the point that if we don't put more patents out faster, it's not going to help us on our innovation rankings within the OECD, that year over year we decline. And I think it's communities. I've come to that conclusion. I know we all try to hire the best and the brightest, but we can all learn from other people in other organizations, what they're doing, the technology approaches they're taking, the lessons learned, and to have deeper and deeper conversations that hopefully that we've been able to stimulate today. So just last point that I'm going to close out, and then we're going to open it up for questions, because I'm assuming you're dying to talk. You step back and you say, okay, got governance. Many of you already have AI policies, but you may not have the proper risk management frameworks that are really pervasive, and I think that are thinking globally. And I think Canadians have to think global, macro first. So I would always recommend that you have the Hiroshima AI process framework, the International Code of Ethical Conduct to develop your AI systems, and I would start there. I would think global, then I would start to drill down and look at other constructive frameworks. Obviously in financial services, I know you've got OSFI, they're still working on their guidelines. They've released some new guidelines, right? But a lot of the things are kind of practical, but there is a broader mantra to lead with, to actually then open up discussions with international players as you're building your business strategies. These are just some sources. The ISO, obviously, I think we're going to start seeing more and more organizations become ISO certified, that their approaches to building AI, because it gives customers, consumers a vote of confidence in how you're working. The NIST, the National Information Security Information from the US, is a framework that I think is really quite good. In terms of Canada, what we've been doing, if you go to the federal government, because I've been looking, they have a little guide, and they reference all these other sources as well, so kind of guiding. But we don't have a universal position at the federal government for, a risk framework that we would recommend for all small businesses. So again, people need guidance. So I'm going to close with just saying your voice really matters. I want to say thank you for coming out this morning. It's been wonderful to be here. Hopefully I've stimulated some thoughts, perspectives. And what I'd like to do is to invite Lynn Lazur and Harry. Harry Pickett, former head of cooperators, CIO, CTO, Manulife, CIBC. For those of you who don't know Harry, he's just a gem. So if we can all just go to the front and then think of your questions, and we'll get underway. But thank you very much.